All right, we're back on Big East Energy Weekly with Jaden Daly of Daily Dose of Hoops. Definitely go check him out and check out his website. It is a fantastic read, fantastic site. I know you got some guys working for you as well. You're not the only one grinding. So, Jaden, these next, I would call them, how many do we have? 2, 3, 4, 5. Marquette, Villanova, Georgetown, Xavier. That's the uncertain, but there's still some potential there. Casey and I have had this conversation where we feel like Richard Pitino at Xavier's done a really good job in the portal. You got Kevin Willard, who had success at Seton Hall, is now back in the Big East at Villanova, and he's done a few nice things, getting a Caden Lewis as a 5-star. Ed Cooley's resume speaks for itself, although he's probably going to lose Thomas Sorber. Of these teams, and Marquette, Shaka Smart, we talked about them. No slight to Shaka because we love him. Would love to have him on the show. I think he's a great culture builder. He's really kind of bucking the trend and not using the transfer portal. So of those 4 teams, where do you see them all kind of shaking out? And is there one team that stands above the rest in this kind of uncertainty, but could potentially break through?
Right now, Mark, I think it's more of a you throw your darts at the wall and pray that they stick in terms of trying to find 4, 5, 6, and 7. I look at Marquette, and I do like what Shaka brings back with Chase Ross. Sean Jones is going to be a big question mark coming off the ACL. Ben Gold isn't tough enough right now to handle the Big East. We saw that a year ago, this past year, where he was exposed more often than not. So he needs to work on that. Shaka's bench needs to develop, and that's something that he was always able to do very well at VCU. This is a different level, and I want to see how it works. I think Nigel James is going to be one of the best freshmen in the conference outside of what UConn brings in with Braylon Mullins and even Eric Ribo, who is going to be a work in progress. But I like what Marquette can be. I love Villanova's potential at the end of the year, and obviously from someone who's covered Seton Hall as long as I have, I do tend to trust Kevin Willard a lot more than most other coaches with a first-year team and an entirely blank canvas coming in. I do think they're going to be right up there. I love what Xavier did in the portal, but my concern there is whether or not they're all going to be Big East level talent.
Right.
You look at the stats and everything looks good on paper, but it's a step up for a majority of the competition. And I think the one guy that Richard is going to rely on a lot is Philip Borovicanin, the forward that followed him from New Mexico. You talked about culture building. You want a guy that's played for you and knows what you're going to expect, and he's going to be the guy in a lot of ways similar to what Richard's father had 2 years ago at St. John's when Danish Jenkins followed him, where he's going to be the leader by example. And I think we're going to notice that a lot more as the year goes on. I think between those 3 teams, Marquette, Villanova, Xavier, that's probably my 4, 5, 6 right now. And I would throw Providence in there ahead of Georgetown, honestly. I think Providence has more upside than Georgetown, especially now with Thomas Sorber going into the draft. I think Ed Cooley has a bigger question mark than he initially envisioned at this point in the middle of May as we record. Providence does have ready-made talent ready to step in, but still needs a go-to scorer. I like what Ryan Mella could be going into his sophomore year, but the Friars do lose a lot. They're probably my number 7 right now.
Real quick, before Casey asks a question, I'm curious just to go about Georgetown. How do you feel, though, about who they brought in? I said in one of our other shows, I thought kind of the tandem of Langston Love and KJ Lewis is really going to make an impact because they're men. Like, these aren't guys that you're bringing in that are, like you just talked about with some of Xavier's guys that are playing, coming from maybe a lower level. These are guys who played at high majors in the Big 12 and SEC respectively. Big 12, all with Arizona and Baylor. And I don't know, those 2 guys seem like ready-made Ed Cooley, like perfect guys to kind of for his system at 6'4", 6'5", 220. They're like linebackers.
Yeah, Love played for Scott Drew, so you know what you're getting out of him. I do like some of the supporting cast members that he brought in, too, obviously having covered both of them between Isaiah Abraham and between Vinci Wachuku, the 7-footer that he got within the conference from St. John's. I think those 2 are going to play bigger roles, especially Wachuku now with Sorber gone. He's going to be more of a big man and get more of a workload that he didn't get this year at St. John's behind Ejiofor and behind R.J. Lewis when Rick played a smaller lineup. Georgetown could be in that 6-7 range, but they're losing so much with Sorber. Yep. And Malik Mack was, in my eyes, a disappointment this year from what we thought we were going to get from him analyzing the conference when he came in from Harvard as a freshman. So he's got some work to do to prove himself too.
Yeah. I've been on the side of Georgetown. I really like what they've done. I do think obviously losing Sorber's hard and Jaden Epps, but I like their additions. I'm a huge Ed Cooley fan. I believe that he's one of the things that he does best is builds a culture in this program. I did think going into the second year there that will also pay some dividends. But I'm interested about Marquette. Their strategy or the way they do things in terms of recruiting is to essentially ignore the transfer portal. And what they're doing instead is really building relationships with these younger kids. In this day and age of guys leaving their schools after a year, whatever, and just chasing the dollar, I'm interested to see if this bet pays off because I believe retention, you talked about it from the standpoint of UConn, why you think UConn will end up winning this because they bring so much back. I kind of wonder with Marquette moving forward as they continue to do very well with the grassroots players right now, and sign those guys early and build those relationships. What do you can you build a program in the Big East and win doing it that way? You think, or is it not enough data yet to play it out?
I think you can, and I think one thing that needs to be looked at and observed more is that Shaka only had one player transfer out this year, and it was Al Amadou, who barely played and ended up transferring down to St. Joe's. So most of his guys who left because they were graduating.
Right.
So you look at Marquette, and this was a veteran team the past 2 years that got younger through attrition, through natural attrition, through guys graduating. And Shaka doesn't necessarily avoid the portal like the played. He's gone into the portal in the past. He got Darryl Morcell out of Maryland his first year. He got Kirk Watt out of Oklahoma that same first year. And then the following year, he got Tyler Kolek out of George Mason, and he became the player of the year in the conference. So Shaka's very selective about going into the portal. I don't think he's coming in and saying F the portal. I think he's just very strategic in how he goes about it. He's always been a player developer and a relationship builder going back to when he was at VCU. And in many ways, his situation at Marquette now is a higher major version of what he had before he went to Texas, where he had a school of football money where he could afford to get away a little bit from what made him who he is. Now he's going back to his roots a little more. You've seen it pay off the first couple of years that he's been there. I do want to see it play out, though, amid everyone else making moves in the portal and how well he can swim alongside the Sharks doing it his way.
Yeah, you mentioned, and we'll transition into, before we get to the people that I feel like are teams that have more work to do, talked about Villanova. I listened to Kevin Willard a little bit on John Rothstein's podcast earlier this week. What do you feel like he has to do in this first year so that this Villanova fan base, which is all excited about the Pope, all excited about the Knicks, there's a lot of what's the ancillary love around Villanova right now, but it's not about the men's basketball program currently. So what does he have to do to get them where they need to be so that we're talking about them constantly on this show come October?
I don't think he necessarily has to make the NCAA tournament. I think it'll help, obviously, but I think he's got to get this team on an upward trajectory in February going into March, which is something that Kyle Neptune struggled with the past couple of years, where Villanova just showed flashes and couldn't get over the hump. Willard has to be the guy to make the improvement happen and time it just right to where Villanova comes down here to New York up here to New York from their perspective and comes in as a team that can do some damage in the Big East tournament, can make some things happen, and can be an upset threat, a bid stealer, so to speak. He's got to get the ball rolling. He's in a very advantageous position right now in terms of the resources that he has. And really doesn't have as much pressure because he's not the guy replacing the guy the way Neptune was with Jay Wright. He's got a little more margin for error. He doesn't have the weight of the world on his shoulders the way Neptune did.
All right. Let's move on to what's left behind. Guys that have work to do. And we actually have a gentleman named Brian Webster who is a Seton Hall guy and is starting a show called Pirate Vibes. He's done 2 episodes already. Talk to us about Seton Hall. You've covered them obviously for years. They're in your market. Tell us what Shaw needs to do so that our guy Brian has more to talk about other than, man, what the hell is wrong with Seton Hall?
Well, first and foremost, he's got to fill the roster up. He still has 4 more scholarships he's got to fill. And I'm intrigued to see where this is going to go. I'm looking at Seton Hall, and I saw Bud Clark in the MAC when he played in Merrimack this past year, and then the year before that in the NEC as a freshman. Seton Hall's got potential, but they're still an incomplete because the roster's not full.
Right.
Alongside Clark, okay, God's Will is back. Justine Felton is back. They're the only 2 that stayed. So they're going to have the onus of explaining the way Shaw wants to play and trying to instill more of that in their teammates. But I look at Seton Hall right now, and I just don't see it happening for them right now. And I feel the same way about Butler because Butler lost a lot as well between Jameel Telford graduating, Pierre Brooks graduating, Connor McCaffrey graduating. That model lost a lot of his production. He's maybe a little more on the hot seat where he's looking at this year as maybe the last chance he has to really make some headway in the conference. I think DePaul could end up passing them in terms of, you saw what the Blue Demons did toward the end of the season. They almost picked off Creighton in the Big East tournament. Chris Holtmann has already made a difference with DePaul's uptick in the Big East and their potential for the future. So I look at DePaul, and it wouldn't shock me if they were 8th or 9th in the conference when you look at Providence and Georgetown right there, and then Butler and Seton Hall probably as a 10 and 11 where you have more questions than you have answers.
Our guy Brian's going to be shattered by that. He's pretty hopeful with some of these guys that Seton Hall's signing, but I actually really like what Butler's done in the portal. I think they've brought in a lot of talent, and I think I just feel like I think the league is in a better spot than right now, than when it's been in the past with a DePaul team where you just kind of knew, just roll the balls out and you're going to be able to win. There's really not a team, like that right now. Maybe you could argue Seton Hall, but I still think anytime you play a Shaheen Holloway team, you're going to have to fight. But I'm interested to hear you kind of talk about Butler, because that's another program where the tradition is so rich there. And you kind of said with Coach Mata, feeling like this might be his last year to kind of make headway, being on the hot seat. Like, when you look at Butler versus the rest of the league, like, it's still almost awkward in some ways for me. I don't know if it is for you guys. But like, do you think that is part of why, like, they're in the spot that they're in? Like, I don't even know what question I'm asking other than, like, it's just something's just off there for me.
Yeah, I covered Butler in the A-10 when Butler was in the A-10 that one year too. So I do think that maybe the move to the Big East was a little rushed, and obviously it wasn't, the ramifications of it weren't realized at the time. But Butler's still operating with a Horizon League type of budget where, compared to the rest of the conference, it lags behind just naturally when you look at what other schools have resource-wise. I do think that Butler could piece something together, but I really want to see what the top options are for this team. I admittedly need to evaluate them a lot more. And I agree with you, Casey, on the Seton Hall point where you still have to prepare for Shaw like you're going to war for 40 minutes. And they've beaten UConn 4 years in a row on Seton Hall's home floor. So I
was waiting for the camera to go back up, Mark.
They've managed to do something right for 40 minutes, 45 this year, because They went to overtime. So
it's just
we'll see
interesting.
what happens.
I think Butler's just such a tradition-rich program, and Coach Mata is such a good coach. It's a great place to go in and play. It just doesn't feel the same as the other teams in the Big East. So I just wonder if that plays a factor of how the team's evaluated in certain situations.
I'm sure it does. I honestly haven't looked into it to that perspective and haven't really evaluated them on a different plane compared to anybody else, but it's a valid point now that you think about it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, this has been another really fun episode of Big East Energy Weekly. Jaden, real quick before we go, just tell people where they can find you so that we can promote your stuff, and then we'll let you go and get on with your day.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Daily Dose of Hoops on Twitter at Daily Dose of Hoops, DALY Dose of Hoops. You put the website into Google, it'll be the first thing that comes up. You'll see work from myself and my staff covering the Big East, covering the MAC, Northeast college basketball, going to expand a little more into the Philly market this coming season. So you'll have more Villanova, more Big Five as well, and not just New York, New Jersey on this end.
That's
all
awesome.
right. Love it.
We'll have to have you back on, Jaden.
Absolutely, gentlemen. Thank you.
All right. That's been Jaden Daly, and this is Big East Energy Weekly for Casey Matthews, Mark Zanetto, and the one and only Jaden Daly. We're out.